Sorry about the angle, and I just tested it. The audio was pretty good. I'll just speak up a little bit because it seems YouTube sometimes makes it louder, sometimes makes it quieter. At least if it's too loud, you can turn it down. So I just thought I'd share the book haul that I just it's over the last 3 days. So Monday, I got one book at the Goodwill. I got more than one book, but there's one that I'm going to share. Really important. I'll share the other ones later. Um, then I went to the church thrift today. I got a little haul, and then I also went to Goodwill. I don't know what brought me to Goodwill today. I really didn't need to, but I'm glad I did because at least one of the books that I got was a pretty big deal. I'm pretty chuffed that I grabbed it. So I'll share first the book that I got on Monday that I was really excited to get. It is called He and I. In the original French, it's called Lui et moi. And it's a story about a Christian mystic who wrote a series of journals. Her name is Gabrielle Bossis. Gabrielle Bossis. Gabrielle Bossis. And so she's a French lady that came to Canada. And I've talked about this before that I think in no small part the splendor of nature, like the Himalayas or the starkness of the deserts, or even like the Rockies, which is what inspired her, the Rockies. And if you read it, you'll actually hear, and I was right because I looked it up after I was reading it, and it sounded a lot like the philosophy of Carmelites, particularly St. John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila. I should change that order. It's Teresa of Avila first, then St. John of the Cross, and then later Teresa Lisieux, where we have their international chapel here just up the road. Teresa Lisieux taught her little way, right? Who am I? Right? We have these great examples of mystics and theologians, and I am just nobody, and I love that. So she came up with this idea of her little way, and in no small part, heavily influenced by Teresa Lisieux, and she was probably an equal time period. This book was written when Teresa of Lisieux was 50 years out from her canonization, and I'm reading it 50 years out from when it was first published in English. I guess it's kind of funny. Imagine me, one of the few people here in this small town, border town, that would be fine finding it in French, but I find it pretty cool in English because then I can actually share it. I don't have a lot of people reading these sorts of books in French. Friends is what I mean. So that was pretty cool. Well, I'll share a couple of the other ones too, actually. So I got this just last week as well. It is a study Bible. I wouldn't really recommend it. It's called the NKJV Apply the Word Study Bible. Live in His Steps. I like it because I just wanted another New King James version. I only have one version. My wife's pink New King James Version Bible. So I wanted something that was a little more, my style. It's not bad. I mean, the only reason why I say I wouldn't recommend it is it doesn't have a lot of information in it beyond the basic. If you were looking for a study Bible, I could recommend others. Now, this here I picked up at one of the church's book rides. This is a really, really important book. This is The Practice of the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence. It was written hundreds of years ago by a Frenchman. And I actually got a hold of this. This was published a while ago. And then just the other day, I was actually able to pick up, again, a more modern rendering of Practicing His Presence by Brother Lawrence. But there's also another gentleman in here by name of Frank Lobach, and uh, and he's more of a modern contemporary. He's from the 30s and 40s and 50s. So I'm going to learn about him. I'm not familiar with him at all, actually. And as I said, the He and I book resonates so much with Thomas A. Kempis's The Imitation of Christ. So I'll just share that. The Imitation of Christ, a wonderful book, inspired Carl Jung's Red Book. And now here's a book that I actually bought and ordered retail. And I'm super excited. I didn't share this because I don't know how many people would be even interested in this sort of stuff. I mentioned before that I'm going to be approaching my second year studying The Great Code by Northrop Frye, the Bible and literature. And I've said this before. This is not a large, huge book, but I would consider it one of the most dense and complex books, in no small part because of the amount of other stuff you need to read to be able to understand. And then later in his life, he published this here. This is the follow up. It's the second book of the Bible in literature. This is called Words with Power. Again, Northrop Frye, if you're not familiar with Northrop Frye, and you have interest in literature, in storytelling, in education, I highly recommend Northrop Frye's The Educated Imagination. It really did change my life. When I first heard about it, it made me realize, as a dyslexic, that maybe if the teachers weren't going to teach me, maybe I could teach myself. And here we are. In a day and age when 90% of people have read less than one book in the last 2 years, I've read more than one book in the last 2 days. So that is freaky for me because, like I said, I finished reading Henry Winkler's autobiography, and because he was dyslexic as a child, his parents didn't look to help him with that. He was unable to learn to chant in Hebrew. He was unable to learn to even read Hebrew because of his dyslexia. Did his parents go and look for a way that he could work around that? No, they just called him, in German, they had a nickname for him, Stupid Dog. And it ain't that much difference. If you look at people with dyslexia or learning disabilities, it's not uncommon that most of their limitations, their self-imposed limitations, are due to how they see themselves because of how people talked about them. So another book that I'm kind of chuffed about is Pierre Berton. I grew up reading a lot of Pierre Berton. It's Canadiana. Pardon me. Canadiana. Yeah. So this is a Canadiana book. It's Prisoners of the North. What it is a story of 5 different people: John Hornby, Robert Service, Lady Jane Franklin, uh, Vilhjalmur Stefansson, and Klondike Joe Boyle. Brand new, very high quality hardcover. Doesn't seem like it's ever been read. And I found this funny because they put a sticker on the front. This is from Kohl's, a Canadian franchise that sells books. So they just put a sticker on the front saying it's autographed. And as you can see, it looks like he just signed a bunch of stickers and shipped them to the stores. But it is cool to have his signature. Pierre Berton. I don't really care. But cool book. I'm pretty excited to read it. I just got this book back. This is my William James Songs of Innocence and Experience, illustrated throughout in full color. That's important because he was as much an illustrator, an artist, as he was a writer and a mystic. So William Blake's Songs of Innocence and Experience. I just got this back. I developed a way to get rid of mustiness out of books. And what I do is I put it in they say put it in a box, but I just put it in a. I have an old refrigerator type shopping bag. You know, one of those insulated um, shopping bags. Well, you can really tell that I was operating in French this morning. My English is terrible, so my apologies. It's a shopping bag that's insulated, but it tore along the insulated edge, so I just stopped using it. But what I realized is it works perfect for this need. I put the books that need to be treated for mold or mildew or whatever. Again, not that much. Oh, you know those books that you get, and it's just like, because I'm allergic to mold and mildew, I really can't read books that are like that. But I found a great hack. If you take all those silica sachets that you get, we used to get a bunch of them with our coconut milk in the box that our coconut milk came from. They used to put these little dry sacks. You sometimes get them with your pills. So charcoal. What I do is I stuff. I put them between the pages. Those little silica drying sacks. They're called. I don't. There's a special word that means that they dry things out, and it actually takes away all that stink. But here we are, 11 minutes, and I've only just begun. But yeah, I just got this one back. Got rid of the stink. This one I just got this week as well. It's a Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis. If you're familiar with C.S. Lewis, um, beyond The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, you'll understand that he was a pretty prolific writer when it came to um, meaning. This one I've shared before, but I just pulled it out because it fits with some of the research I'm doing right now. This is what's called the Kebre Nagast. It's the Lost Bible of the Rastafarian wisdom faith from Ethiopia and Jamaica. Um, it's a beautiful book. This one here happens to have an introduction by Ziggy Marley. I've talked about this before. Ziggy Marley's Conscious Party album was seminal to my early teen years. I just absolutely love that album. Uh, so this is another Canadiana. This is a book that I've shared, or an author I've shared before. I really like his book. He wrote a book about a young Indian boy, an indigenous boy, who ran away from his residential school and he was found frozen by the side of the railroad tracks. And he wrote it as a story. And I found it beautiful, not just for the story and the writing, but also how he weaved the traditional religion and philosophy into the book itself. So I'm excited for this one. It's called The Orenda by Joseph Boyden. Joseph Boyden. Joseph Boyden. Pardon my pronunciation here today. So it's from the Scotiabank Giller Prize, winning author of Through Black Spruce comes a literary masterpiece, a defining epic story. First contact between radically different worlds, steeped in the natural beauty and brutality of our country's formative years. And the reason why that resonated for me, that's also going back to Northrop Frye. That's a book that I think I'm probably going to order as well. It's called, what is it? The Bush Survival or the Survival. It's a collection of essays that Northrop Frye put together, and it was an examination of the Canadian identity. And out of that, he got this idea that the Canadian identity is heavily shaped by the idea that, unlike in other countries where multicultural and such, but they feel like they're conquering the land, their nature. Whereas in Canada, it's more of that the nature is around us, and there's kind of like an existence that comes, an existential crisis. This I can't remember how he worded it, but this idea um, just I don't know how I could explain it. I guess the best way I could explain it is one of my favorite paintings by a group of seven is titled in French for this very reason. It's titled um, Terre Sauvage. Now that's French, and the artist was not French, so it seems odd, right? But Terre Sauvage says so much more than he could have if he had used an English title. Terre, yes, earth, dirt, land, but it can mean earth. It can mean the planet Earth or dirt Earth. And sauvage, it can mean wild and untouched. It can mean uncontainable, unrestrainable. So it says so much more. And terre sauvage is what Northrop Frye was talking about, that we are subject to um, a fear that the wilderness is closing in on us. And it's a Canadian identity thing. So, what I got most excited about today was a book that I found at the Goodwill. Usually, they'd probably want an absolute fortune for it, but it was very reasonably priced. It just came in yesterday, obviously, because I didn't see it on Monday. This is one of the later books written by Harold Bloom. Um, I've watched interviews about him talking about this book, but I haven't seen it. Harold Bloom, I really like because of some of the books he's written about literature and other subjects. But in no small part, the stuff that he's written about on reading and the importance of reading and the importance of literature and what it does for us, not just cognitively, but like physically, how it remaps our brain, but also creates who and what we truly are. So this book is a mosaic of 100 exemplary creative minds, and what's funny is it's never been read. It's never even been opened. It's absolutely beautiful. And so here, this is a quote. I love this Harold Bloom. So awesome. But he quotes Emerson from his essay on experience that our genius were a little more a genius, right? I wonder the play on words like Nietzsche used to like. I could even play on that and wish that if only genius was our genus, right? I love that. But let's see here. He goes through Shakespeare, Cervantes, Montaigne, Milton, and Tolstoy, all some of my favorite. Shakespeare, obviously. We are but actors upon a stage. All the world is but a stage. You Miguel Cervantes, Don Quixote, and Michel de Montaigne. I'm currently working my way through his 53-hour audiobook of his essays, his collection of essays. Milton, just Paradise Lost, right? And I would add Milton and Blake, as I said earlier. The two kind of go hand in hand. Lucretius, again, awesome. Virgil, Ver, St. Augustine, Dante, Chaucer. Then the Yahwist, Socrates, Plato, St. Paul, and Muhammad. Dr. Samuel Johnson, James Boswell, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, Sigmund Freud, and Thomas Mann. All excellent. And here's why I love Harold Bloom, because the gentleman was someone who actually read. So again, another genius of Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, Kafka, Proust, and Beckett. I mean, that chapter is probably going to be my favorite because I adore Nietzsche, if you know me. Kierkegaard, so many people get him wrong. His leap of faith speaks to everything in our life. You must go with what you trust. In fact, modern science argues that is what the human mind is. If you look at Carl Friston's free energy and just simply how the mind works, that there's too much for us to take in, so the mind puts a cone or a filter on what we see and what we perceive, right? So we must take a leap of faith based on the evidence that we have at hand. Goethe, as Nietzsche said, one of the greatest minds that ever lived. Uh, the Germans attribute their very language. One of my favorite quotes uh, in Faust is he speaks how he feels like he's two souls trapped in one chest. I love that. Freud, I like it because I think his talking cure really is important. I think most of his understandings were haven't stood the test of time. The example I give is his idea of the personality. If he had talked about how the way, and he didn't admit how heavily influenced he was by Nietzsche, at least Jung admitted it. Freud, when he talks about how our personality is developed by a certain age when we're young, I think he stole that from Nietzsche, the idea that ressentiment, so many of us develop how we react to the world from an experience when we were young. I liken it to if you discuss people's favorite sports teams, what you'll find is they usually developed a preference around the age of 7 to 11. So again, ressentiment, right? Many of us are not choosing, we're reacting. Thomas Mann obviously is a given. Beckett. Beckett, Kafka, Proust. I've talked about Au cherche du temps perdu, In Search of Lost Time. Beckett, you know I love Waiting for Godot, um, as well as his Theater of the Absurd. Definitely brilliant. So here we go. Molière, definitely. Henrik Ibsen, I've mentioned this. Here's a modern little tidbit you might find interesting. Um, James Joyce actually learned to read Norwegian and even write and converse so that he could send a letter to Ibsen. He was so impressed by him. But talk about a modern example. There's an American politician who claims the same thing. Claims to speak 8 languages. I've heard them speak a few of them. They don't. They don't. They don't. Just like today, I was speaking with someone and I just asked what their other languages were. And they got insulted. And so I had to explain, well, no, what your other languages, like, that's actually insinuating that it's obvious you speak more than one. But in reality, I could have said, so he responded. He got upset that I asked that. And I said, why would you get upset? I was just wondering because I speak more than one language myself. So I could tell by the way, you pronounce certain words in English that you speak another language. I was just wondering what other languages you speak. And what I could have said was, he proceeded and said that he spoke 8 languages. But what I could have said was, we speak 8 languages, but English and French are not one of them. Right? Because I couldn't understand his English and he couldn't understand my French. So here we are, right? But there's an American politician who claims that he learned for this exact same thing. He claims he learned Norwegian so he could read Ibsen. It's like, really? Tell me you stole that anecdote from James Joyce without telling me. Mm-hmm. So Anton Chekhov, Oscar Wilde. I'm a big fan of Oscar Wilde, and that's something that developed by accident. I actually learned about him and read some of his stories by accident, and then found out who and what he was. So here's a new one to me, Luigi Pirandello. Never even heard of him. So next, ooh, that's crazy. I'm not even going to go into that. He titles the chapters in an odd way, and I'll let you look into this. So it's Keter, Chokmah, Bina, Chesed, Din, Tiferet, Netzah, Hod, Yesod, and Malkut. So you can look that up. Those are actually the sections, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can look that up for yourself and see where Harold Bloom got that. And so Chesed, section 4, Luster 7 is John Donne, great English poet, Alexander Pope, Jonathan Swift, Jane Austen, and Lady Murasaki. That's cool. So we're getting into more literature. Then Nathaniel Hawthorne, Herman Melville, Charlotte Bronte, Emily Jane Bronte, and Virginia Woolf. Then Luster 9 is Ralph Waldo Emerson. Love him, love him, love him. As did Nietzsche, by the way. Nietzsche carried around a volume of his essays while he was writing. Um, I'll let you guess which book he was writing when he was carrying that around. I'll give you a hint. It starts with Z. Lester 9, Emerson, Dickinson, Robert Frost, Wallace Stevens, and another one of my favorite, T.S. Eliot. We are the hollow men, we are the straw men. Head piece filled with straw, row upon row. Next Lester is Wordsworth, then Percy Bysshe Shelley, John Keats, Giacomo Leopardi, Alfred Lord Tennyson. So lots of English there. Then we move on to Algernon Charles Swinburne, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, Christina Rossetti, Walter Pater, and Hugo von Hofmannsthal. And most people would be like, oh, what? Not unfamiliar with Hugo von Hofmannsthal. Hofmannsthal. Next is Victor Hugo, Gérard de Nerval, Charles Baudelaire. You know I love Charles Baudelaire. Probably my favorite poem is his cat, where he talks about the qualities of his cat. It's beautiful. It's like a reverse gestalt. That's in his Les Fleurs de Mal. How do they translate that? The flowers of sickness, the flowers of pain, pain of flowers. I don't know. Look it up for me. I can't remember. Baudelaire's Les Fleurs de Mal, what it is in English. What it is in English. Oh boy, I forget to speak English sometimes. Then we got Arthur Rimbaud and Paul Valéry. Next, we have Nazar with Homer, Louis Vaz de Camus, no idea, James Joyce, Alejo Carpentier, Octavio Paz. Then we go Stendhal, Mark Twain, Faulkner, William Faulkner, Ernest Hemingway, and Flannery O'Connor. Then in Chod, we have Whitman, Walt Whitman, Fernando Pessoa, Hart Crane, Federico Garcia Lorca, and Luis Cernuda. Many of these I'm unfamiliar with at this point. Luster 16, George Eliot, Vida Cather, Edith Wharton, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and Iris Murdoch. Iris Murdoch, not Irish. Iris. And so next in Yesod, we have Gustave Flaubert, Jose Maria Etza de Queiroz, Joaquim Maria Machado de Assis, Jorge Luis Borges, and Italo Calvino. In Luster 18, we have my William Blake, D.H. Lawrence, Tennessee Williams, Rainer Maria Rilke. I love Rainer Maria Rilke. Eugenio Montal. No idea. Now we have Honoré de Balzac. I've talked about Honoré de Balzac. He's one of those authors like Nietzsche that's tough to translate to English because he says so much. And much of what he says is not on the page. It's either insinuated or sounds like or alluded to. But yeah, so here we are. Second to last Luster. Balzac, Lewis Carroll, Henry James, Robert Browning, and William Butler Yeats. Yeah, interestingly, I'd recommend you look into fairies and William Butler Yeats. He was actually quite a scholar of Irish folklore and fairy folk. Seems interesting. Interesting little um, research hole to fall down into. And so the final luster is Charles Dickens, Fyodor Dostoevsky, Isaac Babel, Paul Celan, and Ralph Ellison. Philip Ellison, right? So, and in his coda, he entitles it "The Future of Genius." That sounds quite interesting. But yeah, it's just short little pieces. I mean, honestly, um, I'm not even sure how even valuable it'll be for me because most of this stuff I could look up and get online, right? But I just think it's cool to have here. Okay, so let's go past Goethe, Freud, and Mann and look at Binah. Yes, so Binah is a section for me. It really is. Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, Kafka, Proust, and Beckett. Really, really love this, and that's funny. Yeah, he quotes Kaufman a lot. I talked about that in a recent podcast. I think Götterdämmerung, probably my favorite title of a Nietzsche work. Götterdämmerung. It's Twilight of the Idols, or better would be Guts and Dämmerung. So it'd be like not Twilight in the sense that we would think like it's literally the light is going out on our idolatry. That sort of idea, right? It's beautiful. He talks about. I love Harold Bloom, everything he talks about, but it's not much. For me, I know a lot about these different authors, but I'd say about half of them I'm not really that familiar with. So it'll be really interesting for me. I'm excited to read some of the authors uh, that I know of, but I'm not terribly familiar because I know for a fact that any of the additional strings that Harold Bloom might give me to pull on are going to be amazing, right? Because here's his Thomas Stearns Eliot, his T.S. Eliot, his Wasteland. I was just reading his Wasteland. It's over by my desk. I have a collection. It's a beautiful book, hardcover, and it's a collection of his poems, Proof Rock, and The Wasteland. And one of my favorite poems, believe it or not, and I'd recommend you look it up, is Hippopotamus. Hippopotamus. Not well known by T.S. Eliot, but it's probably one of my favorite, next to Strawman. But that's a given, right? Yeah, and talk about how things go full circle. Here, Eliot had his assimilated Bram Stoker's Dracula to Tennyson's Mariana or Maud, with a touch of Oscar Wilde's Salome thrown in. Only a genius of exacerbated sensibility could have given us this unnerving splendor. Well, I'll go further than that. Salome resonates through the millennia that connects even Jung and Nietzsche as well as to the Bible. But I mean, that's a given. That, Nietzsche was definitely a scholar. So that's beautiful. I was really excited to see this. This will be something really fun to do. In fact, I may even go through it. That would be something cool. That maybe I could do little 60-second shorts on each one. That'd be something to do, right? Right, because that would show literacy versus fluency, right? Because maybe I could help people distill Harold Bloom's short little insights. Maybe I could help distill them down to even further, right? With the hopes of inspiring people to be interested in learning more, right? So here we are. Final book is The Quantum and the Lotus. I wasn't really all that familiar with it. I've heard of it. I've heard it mentioned in podcasts and in passing. I haven't heard or read of it mentioned all that much. Um, but what it is Mathieu Ricard and Trin Schran Thun, whatever. I don't know how to pronounce his name. But it's supposed to be outlining, all right, working in the lab of a Nobel Prize winning scientist. But when he read, Mathieu Ricard trained as a molecular biologist, working in the lab of a Nobel Prize winning scientist. But when he read some Buddhist philosophy, he became drawn to Buddhism. Eventually, he left his life in science to study with Tibetan teachers. So it says when Mathieu Ricard and Trin Thuan met at an academic conference in the summer of 1997, they began discussing the remarkable connections between the teachings of Buddhism and the findings of recent science. Actually, that was one of my first podcasts. I talk about how quantum theory actually makes the case that Buddhism, right, might be the most insightful path for us. I guess I'll share here. The Lord Chando's letter and other writings by Hugo von Hofmannsthal. I wasn't actually going to share it because it's such an obscure little tome, but considering that this is one of the geniuses that Harold Bloom wrote about, I'll make that the last book. But yeah, so I'm pretty excited. Did I mention Grit? I don't know if I mentioned Grit. That one's I'm pretty excited for because there's quite a wait list for the audiobook. Um, right? And I won't be reading these books in a digital format. I mean, my phone is too small for me to be able to read on it. I just not exactly a big fan of the ebooks. I use them because I find them very handy to search within. But reading, I'd much rather do the physical book. Especially for me, I make sure that I check the paper and the font and the typeface. Make sure that it's fairly dyslexic friendly. But yeah, I'm excited about this because I think the subtitle of the book is "The Power of Passion and Perseverance." Um, yeah, I think that's truly what mindfulness is: meditation, mindfulness, awareness. Um, as Carl Jung said, the vast majority of evil in this world could be sourced to the simple fact that most people walk around and act completely unconscious, right? So many people have forgone their free will and their agency for simplicity, right? For to be told what to do and what their path may be, because it is so difficult to choose for oneself, right? But so we'll leave it at that. Hopefully, you enjoyed this little